Hello and welcome back to the Technology in Science podcast brought to you by Barrington James. My name is Toby Hyde and today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm joined by the CEO of Panda Surgical, Manios. Manios, great to have you with us today.
Toby, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. Always happy to discuss about what we do.
Excellent. Now, Manios, for those of the people out there that don't know about Panda Surgical, what can you tell us about the company and the project you're working on?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Manios. I'm the chief executive at Panda Surgical, where we're building the first ever handheld robotics platform for minimally invasive neurosurgery. What we want to do is offer neurosurgeons enhanced dexterity and decision support to make these very difficult operations safer, more effective, and more widely.
Amazing. So you're trying to really target a market that's got such a sort of large scale that can really help and make life easier for surgeons and patients, both alike.
That's really what we think, and it really is strange to us. Of course, we're biased. It is one of the more delicate approaches out there, but it is also one of the disciplines that haven't been updated as others have. So you see all these technological advancements in all of surgery, really, and in neurosurgery too. You can see and you can find your way around structures that you previously couldn't, but not necessarily in instrumentation. So specifically for minimally invasive approaches through the head, for example, we can see that technological advancements have stagnated slightly. So this is where we want to jump in and try to improve patient outcome in a modern way, if you will.
Excellent. And the way things are going so far, obviously Panda Surgical as a company hasn't been going for very long, but I know you've been working on the project for quite some time now. What can you tell us about the background and sort of how you got to where you are today?
We absolutely have. It's very short and very long concurrently. I'm not sure if lots of people can relate to that. So Panda Surgical is a University College London spin-out, meaning that prior to becoming a startup, this project pre-existed within the confines of the university. So this was a PhD project, my PhD project at University College London, UCL. And it was co-supervised by Professor Dan Stoyanov, which is a leader in AI-assisted surgery and robotic surgery. And Mr. Hani Marcus. Hani is one of the leading neurosurgeons, pioneers, if you will, in the space. He's even going to write some of the guidelines on how to do and evaluate these approaches. So this was a project within UCL. And when we were at a point of, we had done some proof of concept validation, we had done some market discovery, but really in the space of university research. We got in contact with Primanova Technologies. Primanova is a medtech, a neurosurgical device company that saw some interest in what we do, and this is how we managed to secure that first investment to spin out into what we currently are doing. And I need to also mention UCL Business, which is the business branch from UCL, and their support from the very early stages of this project that made this in the end into a viable commercial opportunity, or at least I want to believe it's a viable commercial opportunity. We'll see.
No, I'm sure it will be, Manios. And obviously, you mentioned there the support that you've been given by UCL, Primanova, but also the rest of the team that you're working on. You've got to give a lot of credit and support to the guys that have been working on this project with you so far.
I'd say these are the only people that should get any credit. So the team, Panda Surgical, has been founded by myself, Dan, and Hani, my two supervisors during the PhD, which are also actively involved with the project as well. But I really need to shout out the actual full-time engineering team at Panda, George Dimitrakakis. They have been involved from, I'd say, even during my PhD studies, they were assisting as we are assisting each other in a research group because they came from UCL too, and they have been more than full-time on the project. But of course, this goes even beyond to that. We have a strong clinical team that is assisting. We have regulatory support. We have a strong advisory network of medtech veterans that are providing guidance, sometimes even governance. It really can't be not even a few people effort. Like even us, we are a very young company. We're now this is our 11th month of operation, but even to now, the effort is something you don't expect when you're starting. So it really has to be a multidisciplinary and multi-people effort.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioned that the multidisciplinary aspect of it. Obviously, when focusing on surgical robots, you obviously have the surgeons involved as well. Just how important is it to communicate and work with surgeons to be able to ensure that your robot is going to be not just useful for them, but also better for the patients?
I'd say it's pivotal. I think you can't do it otherwise. We're fortunate enough, and this is one of the things that the university has also played a very impactful role for what we're trying to do. First of all, my co-founder, Hani, he's a neurosurgeon. The whole problem formulation was because in his practice, he found this gap in technology. He very often could see tumor. He was very confident, I can take this tumor out. But the current instrumentation wouldn't allow him. The current instruments wouldn't allow him. So this is, in essence, and by default, this project was supported by clinical feedback. But from my PhD days, and especially now, we're trying to keep that clinical relevance. We have some clinicians within the team that help us with studies and with collecting feedback and with speaking to other clinicians. And if you don't have that constant feedback, if you don't have that circle if you don't have that interaction to close that development cycle or development circle, I think it's really impossible to come up with a solution that will be clinically relevant. A lot of, I'm derailing here, but this is a subject I'm very passionate about. I think any research, this could be university research, this could be product research, but any research and development, there's very often that aspect, and me, myself, I'm an engineer, where you come up with a solution that looks really, it looks awesome. Technically, it's out there, but then no one really wants to use. And that in medical devices, I think, could be a trap you fall into. So having that clinical feedback, having that interaction, it's massively important, both with clinicians, and I'll take it a step further, with patients too. We have involved patients into our development from a very early stage, and that has been really, really useful to understand what are patients willing to accept in the operating theater, because you really, what you're building, you have to tackle all stakeholders at once.
Of course, yeah, like I said, that collaboration with clinicians, surgeons, patients is so important for not just your robot, but sort of any medical device. It's such a key element within the industry. I guess.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry.
No worries. I guess from the feedback you have had so far from surgeons and patients, has there been anything specific that's been mentioned that you see as a real positive and something that you can really sort of strive towards?
Sure. So I think to answer this, I should probably provide some context into what we're actually building, so that people can also understand what we're showing surgeons and what we're asking to comment on. We are building handheld robotic instruments, as I mentioned. When patients, when they have tumors or some abnormalities in the brain or at any segment of the spine, what they normally used to do back in the day, they would cut the whole thing open. For example, they would remove a part of the skull to gain access to those anatomies. In the 90s, this revolutionary, and really was approach, maybe even earlier, for minimally invasive neurosurgery, started taking advantage of natural or artificial orifices on the skull, for example. That was through the nose or through the eyes, through the ears, tiny incisions on the top of the head, tiny incisions on our backs. And that would allow surgeons to penetrate those anatomies and find access to those confined spaces in a much less invasive way. Now, I'm not clinically trained, so I can't necessarily comment on it, but this sounds extremely difficult. And it really is, because even when you get access to those spaces, when you have this access through these narrow corridors, it's very difficult to manipulate tissue because you're constrained at every end. So even when surgeons do these operations, and it takes them a long time to do them, they're still constrained by current instruments, and they very often can't take all of the tumor they need, or all of the and cure the abnormality as best they can. So this is where we want to come in, and we want to offer surgeons enhanced dexterity. We want to allow them to penetrate those confined spaces and to manipulate tissue very delicately, very precisely, to remove more tumor, to remove more, to cure more of any abnormality in those spaces. And we want to do that with a hardware and software solution, so that we can also enhance their decision support. And if they see something that doesn't look right, they have some advice whether this makes sense. So this is the proposition we're presenting to surgeons, and the feedback we've been receiving thus far has been very, very positive. I'd say even with surgeons that we've discussed and they didn't necessarily see a big impact on what we do, their take was, we're not saying this is useless, we want to try it first. And I think that's a very reasonable argument, especially when it has to do with patient care. You really need to be sure that what you're doing is going to have a positive impact on the surgeon. And on that end, we have been including clinicians into the actual testing. As I mentioned prior, during our studies, we've been doing preclinical cadaveric and simulation studies where we had a number of different surgeons join in of different experience, where they've tried our devices, and we even had comments to the point of, I could use this in my OR tomorrow. Problem is they cannot, so there's a long regulatory burden before they're able to do that. But in terms of feedback, that was very, very positive for us.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely sounds like there's going to be lots of future success for Panda Surgical. One of the things you mentioned there is sort of the regulation and approval. I know sort of that is a huge part of the process for any medical device. And obviously, in your 11th month journey so far as a company, how has that sort of affected your decision making and where you want to take the project moving forward?
Toby, what I'll say will come to you as a shock. We don't have regulatory approval yet at 11 months. I'm only joking. Of course, we are a very young company. The regulatory approach will dictate everything you do in terms of getting to market and how soon you can get to market and how risky your product is. We often talk about the burden and how difficult it is to obtain, but I think this is more than reasonable. We are talking about patients' lives, and sometimes we're even talking about how the surgeon is affected by the product. So I think if it's rigorous, if it is painstaking to gain regulatory approval, that's only fair, that's only reasonable. But what we have tried to do is understand how we can get to a fair regulatory approval that has de-risked all of the problems a medical device could offer as soon as possible. So we don't want to cut any corners at all. We just want to understand what the FDA thinks this device should be proving in order to prove safety, efficacy, and feasibility. We're following, of course, two different approaches, both in for the US and European markets, European UK markets. We are a brain surgery device, a spine surgery device, so anything with the central nervous systems in interaction with the central nervous system is considered high risk. But the way we have tried to de-risk our pathway towards the regulatory approval is through quality management. Of course, as it is a subject that's very often suggested in these types of discussions. And we have already engaged with regulatory bodies to have that discussion, to understand what they think is reasonable in terms of safety. So with the FDA, we had a pre-submission application, and that was a huge effort on our end. It took us a long time to prepare it, because you want to go to the FDA and describe your device better than you even understand it, because otherwise they wouldn't. So that discussion we had was really, really useful, and it de-risked our understanding. And in Europe, it's a bit more convoluted. I'd say we're trying to have discussions in the UK with the MHRA to again show the device, say what we think our plan would be for regulation. But then, of course, it will be a back and forth, including a lot of studies, including a lot of feedback to try and get into market essentially and help patients as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. There's obviously lots of back and forth to go forward with that, with say the FDA or CE marking. These things obviously do take a lot of time. Do you have any sort of targets in mind for when you hope to be at the stage where you're sort of close to being FDA approved and then can obviously push forward and go onto market?
Well, I'll share our targets. Don't come back to us in a couple of years to see if I'm within. We are thinking, so in Europe, things are a bit more difficult to judge. I'm sure you're aware, if people aren't, there's a bit of a backlog when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to finding a notified body to help you through regulation. So with that, I think when it comes to technology, we could be ready for submission within the next couple of years with human studies, with everything that we would need to generate. But it really will depend on how the landscape will be shaped. We are very much targeting that market. In the US, I think things are a bit more, a bit easier to forecast. So we have been following a very accelerated approach thus far. Within those 10, 11 months of existence, we've already done a few cadaveric studies. We've done this pre-submission. We've developed our quality system up to a point where we could consider current development. So we're confident that we are going to have a clearance by the end of 2026. This is what we're currently targeting at. It is highly accelerated, but I think that my team's hard work and the way we have managed to de-risk the project justifies that forecast. Again, this in a couple of years' time, we'll have a much clearer idea.
Yeah, of course. But from the outside, it seems that the progress you've already made as a company in your short period just goes to show that the team is definitely sort of capable of getting you to that stage, and hopefully by the end of 2026 you have a real positive outcome on that.
We hope so. We hope so, absolutely.
Yeah, no, likewise. One thing you also mentioned there is the technological aspects, and you feel like you can be there within the next few years. I guess one of the big trends in technology at the moment is AI and artificial intelligence. Obviously, I know you are using that as part of your product, but yeah, what can you tell us about sort of where you hope to sort of work within the AI field and what impact that can have on your robots?
Sure. There is a lot of discussion on AI, and we are a robotics company, but AI and robotics are very often difficult to divide. And I think there's a very good reason for that. The way we want to use AI is to make good surgeons better, and to make the best surgeons, you can make them even better, but you know what I mean. We want to take the burden from surgeons of that decision fatigue or this problem that very often is present in neurosurgery, where something doesn't necessarily look like what it is. So we want to help the surgeon make these decisions that when they're removing tumor, they're actually removing tumor. And there's a number of different technologies we have been trying to evaluate, have been trying to develop. We think that intraoperative support is one of the things we could offer the surgeon, and that really is with helping them understand anatomies or helping them understand where the critical areas are, so as to avoid them. But we also think there's a huge way to help the surgeons after the operation, and even before. Before would be through training, and after would be through their admin burden. Any hospital spends, any surgeons, any doctor really, they spend a lot of time after the operation logging in data, trying to understand what went well, what didn't. So we think that finding an automatic way to do that would really be very beneficial to help the surgeon all around this operation. Of course, this is how we want, as a robotic surgery company, to help surgeons. I'm sure there's a whole different discussion to have how AI could help surgeons in general. And I have communicated these opinions prior. I have very strong opinions that it really is the future. But what we want to do specifically is use AI to allow surgeons to make better decisions in order to improve patient outcome.
Mhm. Of course, yeah, because when you speak to someone that sort of has no prior experience of AI and stuff, they feel like the robots are going to take over and replace the surgeon. But that's not what you're trying to do here, is it? You're just trying to make the life easier and better for the surgeons.
So I think this is a discussion to have. AI replacing anyone, I think, is a discussion to have. But in surgery, I think, and we actually have done a study on that, where we employed a very primitive AI, trying to help surgeons understand anatomy. And we were thinking that junior surgeons, obviously, or trainees, they would obviously be helped by that AI. And they were like, their decision making was drastically improved. What we didn't expect, and actually was the case, is that expert surgeons made even better decisions. So we think that AI could be used to help all surgeons, all professions, if we take it a step further, to make better decisions. So while automation is something that could happen, I would welcome that change, because I think that when we get to a point where automation is needed, is because now the surgeons are doing something more important than menial tasks. For example, suturing is a thing that is very often mentioned in surgery as an automated task. Yeah, suturing is a great thing to automate because a surgeon is spending a lot of time on that. It's a difficult task, but it's not too critical in terms of the time at least you need to spend on it. So if we had a robot doing that, that would be great. Taking it a step further to fully automate surgery, I do think that this is the future. And to be honest, I think we should really try to do that, but I think we're not there yet. So we currently need to use technology to help surgeons perform their job that they're already doing in an excellent manner, do it even better, and then learn from that to come up with even better technologies. And from that, we'll come with this maybe fully automatic solution. Because in the end, we really want to improve patient outcome. And if AI can help with that, and I think it can, if robotics can help with that, I think it would be a missed opportunity to not do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. And there's so many different areas that AI can help that you've mentioned there. I guess ultimately the patient outcome is the most important thing here. But from a surgeon's perspective, using AI can really sort of save them, like you mentioned, lots of time. Do you feel that can allow them to perform more surgical procedures, allowing more patients to be seen and less sort of waiting times?
That's an incredible question, and that really is one of the bigger problems currently in the healthcare landscape. I can very intimately speak about the UK, where we have seen a surge in waiting lists, and of course that doesn't necessarily have to do with the technology, but let's not get there. It certainly doesn't have to do with surgeons, nurses, doctors, and their skill set. I think still in the UK, I'm very confident in the UK we have one of the most talented teams, one of the biggest hospitals around the world, where expertise is not hard to find. What is hard to find is time, absolutely. So if we take our approaches, for example, minimally invasive neurosurgical approaches, to learn these techniques, it's very difficult. So when surgeons actually do, they're naturally concentrated in these bigger hospitals that can deploy and can support these techniques. So when you want to be treated for a brain tumor, for example, you need to be referred to these bigger clinics, and that takes time. We think that with a solution like ours, and the specific reason I'm mentioning the Panda Surgical technology is because we're building very inexpensive instruments that are very easy to learn. And the reason this is the case is because our instruments are handheld. We don't deploy these big robots that really useful for other disciplines. In minimally invasive neurosurgery, tool exchange is rapid, it's constant. So these big robots, we think, wouldn't be very beneficial here. So our handheld instruments are very easy to learn, and we have the study data to back this up. Although we are doing more studies, I don't want to come off as overconfident here. Very easy to learn, very easy to incorporate into the workflow. You just leave it on the table and grab it whenever you need. And very importantly, very inexpensive. So we believe that with our robotic technology and with other robotic technologies, you will allow more hospitals to deploy these very complex procedures. Sometimes you will allow hospitals to stop doing or reduce open skull surgery, just go directly to the robotic approach, and thus reducing waiting times. This is one aspect we are trying to help with. Reducing the operative burden will, of course, allow the surgeon to concentrate on clinical work, which is the most important. But also, there's a lot of other technologies that can help with decreasing waiting times. And I'm very happy to say that in the robotics landscape, there is a lot of different, both startups and established companies that are focusing on doing more surgery, or if not more surgery, doing current approaches more efficiently.
Oh, excellent, and it's good to see that you're one of those companies trying to sort of really make an impact in that field. You mentioned as well there, sort of having a handheld makes it a lot more inexpensive. Do you feel that that's one of the big barriers to a lot of surgical robots to actually get to market, the cost of the development and then obviously getting them into hospitals? And do you think Panda Surgical has sort of a USP there in the fact that it will be a handheld and it won't take up a huge amount of room to have in the operating theatre?
I certainly do. I am very much, of course, biased, but I'm very much of that mindset. So the cost to develop and regulation, this is an extremely high cost for I'd say for any medical device company, but maybe specifically for robotic surgery company. Then the cost to sell, manufacture, distribute is also quite high, being a hardware software solution. Then current surgical systems are quite expensive for a hospital to both to purchase and maintain. So I do think we have a bit of an advantage there. There's a lot of handheld robotics companies out there that they're doing incredible work, and we're very inspired by any success story we see. Where we come in, that I think other companies have not necessarily spent the resources in, is we're building devices specifically for corridor access. So we're not using this remote center of motion if you're technical, or the single access points that laparoscopy does. In your surgery, you have to constrain the full shaft of the instrument through the nasal channel, for example. So this, most of handheld instruments through the control interfaces wouldn't be able to be deployed there. But we're also making extremely small instruments. Our maximum instrument diameter is 3 millimeters, which makes it very easily incorporated into the workflow and into the anatomy. And in length, I think, I'll have to double check, but I think our instruments are probably 12, 13 millimeters in length. So we can access very, very small spaces and add this articulation. We think that one of our USPs lies there. But of course, dexterity is what we want to offer surgeons and enhance maneuverability. But we want to do that in a wider solution because we think that otherwise it would be a missed opportunity. We want to help with a complete solution as much as we can.
Obviously, the hardware is a vitally important aspect of that. I know we briefly touched on software and sort of the AI side of things, but it's not just that that's involved in the robots. Like you say, you have the actual surgical instruments, the hardware for the handheld device. Just how much time have you spent developing a handheld device that's sort of going to be really ergonomic and sort of easy to use for the surgeon?
The ergonomics aspect of it was also one of my core components in the PhD. So this wasn't originally the case, but very often, as it is with research, you have to adapt, and the more you learn, the more you want to learn. This is the way we see it. We have both researched and evaluated ergonomics as part of my PhD studies, but that was really in a proof of concept device. So by doing that, we de-risked essentially what we want the device to look like, whether when it comes to a point where it is robotically actuated. Now that we have an actual R&D and product development approach, we want to go and revalidate everything, because we know what an ergonomic device should look like. But from a proof of concept prototype to an actual working MVP, it's a whole different development approach distance. So we've also done some studies as part of the company, and I'd say the most important studies were as part of the company. And we think that our devices are very easy to learn and very easily incorporated into the workflow. We have been asking surgeons um, to provide us their personal feedback on how the device feels, and that has been overwhelmingly positive. But this we need to back up with hard evidence, with quantitative data, and this is our focus going forward. We think we have an ergonomic device, and we want to validate that mission.
Yeah, excellent. And it seems like a lot of the conversation we're having here does relate back to the surgeon and making it sort of easier for them and ergonomics. So it's so clear to see how important those relationships can be and are moving forwards. Obviously, moving a little bit away from the technical side of things at Manios. Obviously, you are a small company. I think there's only sort of, is there 4 of you currently working?
That's 4 full-time people, yes.
Yeah, so obviously, as you develop it and grow this project, obviously the culture within the workplace is always going to change, and that's something that's spoken about quite a lot. But just how important is it for you to sort of stick to your beliefs and the culture that you've currently set when you do grow the company?
I think that's this is something I have been not necessarily struggling, especially the actual struggles we have as a robotic surgery company, but this is something I have been thinking about. I think you have to be very persistent to maintain your culture, but you should also be open to outside opinion and to outside people's behavior. Because especially, and maybe this is because this is the first time any of us do it within the core team. We think we have the expertise when it gets to product. We have the expertise when it gets to the clinical proposition, because we've been doing this for a long time in our careers, if you will. But when it comes to actual getting this into market and getting this to regulatory approval, I think while you should stick to what you believe and what you think is important, you should also be open to what outside opinion is. So the way we've been doing that, we have a very, I would say, healthy, but you need to ask the team to be coming from me, approach onto how to tackle different matters. And of course, we get advice from our network, from the founding team, Dan and Hani. They're extremely experienced in the space. And at the end of the day, you want to do something you're comfortable with, you want to do something you believe in, but you also need to keep in mind, let me see what this led to, so that next time I'm more well informed. So to me, culture is really important, and even looking to grow the team, we would really want people that align with us in our beliefs and in the way we work to join. But you have to be open to anything that could be beneficial to your goal, because again, your goal is to help patients, and when that is the goal, it can put everything else into perspective.
Yeah, of course, and sort of like say the end goal is to help patients and patient outcome. It's important that sort of you create a culture where everybody within the team is well aligned with that, and ultimately wants this project to succeed to help with patient outcomes. But we spoke about sort of growing a little bit, and obviously we mentioned end of 2026 for FDA approval. But sort of in the more short term, what's the aims for Panda Surgical in, say, the next 12 months?
This is also a rehearsal for my next board meeting. What we want. So currently, we were just fresh off this pre-submission application with the FDA. That was a very big effort to manage, coordinate, and then even meet with the FDA. The immediate approach, the immediate step from that is to take that feedback in and strategize, plan what we need to do in the shorter term. And what we need to do is acute risk analysis, human factors, usability studies. This is something we intended to do anyway, but we now have better guidance, better clearance into how to actually organize them. That's as far as the US market is concerned. In Europe and in the UK specifically, we have been organizing a first in human study. We're extremely excited for that. We're hoping that This will take place, if not by the end of this year, very early next year. And this will be limited scope study where we will try to validate the feasibility of the safety of the device. Feasibility too, but effectiveness, this should be a longer term goal. So we are very much focusing product development to accommodate to that clinical data collection. And we are, again, being very aggressive. We are following a very accelerated pathway, but we're hoping that from what we've seen thus far and with a bit of extra help, this could be a feasible goal in the shorter term.
Amazing. And you mentioned a few times that you're on this accelerated pathway. Are you surprised just by how far you have come in the short period of time?
Well, how far we've come, I think that's always subjective. I think there's companies that have done much better. There's companies that haven't done as good. I'm very happy with our progress. And to your question, yeah, I'm very surprised. To be honest, it's not that I had a lower expectation. I didn't necessarily have any expectations. I didn't know what to expect. But I think what I'm mostly very happy, very surprised, if you will, about is how much product development we've done within those few months. Because when we spun out, when we finished, quote unquote, that research project, we barely had one working instrument, and working, again, in quotes. It was enough to prove the concept of robotic surgery in those confined spaces. Since then, we've expanded our portfolio. We've made it much safer, much easier to control. So this amount of technical work, even if we leave all of the commercials aside, I'm not saying I won't say I'm surprised, because I really believe and still do in the capability of the team. But yeah, it was a lot of work that we did in a short amount of time. And then commercially, yeah, of course, speaking with the FDA, getting the feedback we did, I'm happy. I'm not surprised. I'm very happy, because in the end, you want to get to have as big of an impact as you can, right? And the only thing you can hope for is to de-risk the project to the best of your ability. So I think in that front, we've been on the right track. Of course, this could be disproved at any point, but right now, I've been very, very happy with how the things have been looking in this sort of way.
Yeah, and of course, just from speaking to you, it's so clear to see sort of how sort of proud you are of the journey you've been on so far. And obviously, for yourself, being the CEO of a startup, this is sort of the first time you've done it. How have you found that experience of sort of, so to speak, jumping straight in the deep end and working as the CEO of your own company straight off the back of the PhD?
I'm not sure it was the right choice, if you will. I think having a bit more experience in the field is always and will always be beneficial. I'm very aware of the wrong decisions I've made, and in the end, it is a team effort for what you're trying to accomplish. Having said that, I think it's a great journey to embark on. The things I've learned in this time, I don't think that plenty of other jobs would offer. So I've been really fortunate to even be in this position and to even get to the stage where we are, which is really, really early stage. Like, most of the things that we need to do, we haven't done, if you will, despite how young or whatnot we are. So I think the amount of things, considering our state, that I've learned, I'm in a very fortunate situation. I've been very lucky to be here. And that's why we're trying to put in as much work as we can to gain more from this journey. And then if we can offer back in this case as patient outcome, you can get a better reward than that, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. What would you say would be the biggest piece of advice you could give to someone who perhaps wants to take a similar career path as yourself?
I think I wouldn't be the best to give advice in this instance, as in, I'm still very inexperienced in what we do, still very young in the field, not necessarily in age. But I could give an advice to people that want to take their research and commercialize it, because that's essentially what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
I think it's a journey worth taking. It is going to be tough, but what job isn't is my counter argument to that. And you are going to learn a lot of things. Chance of failure is extremely high. This is something you just have to live with. This is something we live with every day. But the journey alone is making that hard work be worthy of the effort. And then, depending on what you do, but that satisfaction you get when people use your research, when people use the product you've been building, I think that really justifies the cost. So I would argue that people shouldn't be afraid to try their chances. And then spinning out again isn't always the solution here. Sometimes it's licensing, sometimes it's continuing research. My initial plans, for example, were to, after my PhD, to continue as a postdoctoral, to try and get into human still within the university. I still think that would be a viable option. It would probably just take more time, considering how you have to also apply for your funding and govern yourself differently to what you would do in a company. So weigh your options, and if your end goal is for people to use the product, just go with what's best. It is almost always worth it, even if nothing comes out of it in the end, which is very much a scenario for us too. The journey alone is really not necessarily fun, but worth taking.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it's been worth the risk for yourself so far, and the progress has been really positive. Obviously, we have discussed the future, but for Panda Surgical as a company, say we jump 5 years ahead, where do you hope for Panda Surgical to currently be in 5 years' time?
We're hoping to certainly be on the market. We're hoping to have hospitals use our devices. This is our goal, both in short and longer term. We want as many patients to benefit from what we do, if it proves to be a beneficial opportunity, a beneficial proposition, as we can. So in 5 years' time, we would hope to have our first core product regulated. We will then want to build on that core product to regulate further pipelines, maybe that AI capability I've been describing. So we certainly want our device to be used in patients regularly. Maybe 5 years is pushing it, but I think that first regulatory approach, which is one of the first burdens, one of the first milestones, will be pivotal to that. But this is how we envision the company. Of course, to do that, we'll need to have expanded. We will need to have established collaborations. But yeah, this is something we're very much looking into doing anyway.
Excellent. Definitely fingers crossed that within 5 years we can see Panda Surgical making a real impact. Obviously, you have had some publicity recently as well. You're on the news here in the UK. How was that as an experience for yourself?
So that I want to mention again, as I do every time. The reason we were on was to really support and further progress the work that Ideal has been doing. I'm not sure if you're aware with the Ideal framework, but it is a cohort of surgeons, engineers, clinicians, professionals in general that have formed this team and have spent a long time trying to understand how robotic surgery could be evaluated and validated within a clinical scenario as efficiently and safely as possible. So Ideal understands that as a manufacturer, you will spend a lot of time and a lot of money, maybe more importantly, on clinical studies. So what they have tried to come up is guidelines in order to ensure safety, feasibility, and effectiveness in the least effort that is acceptable to do that. So with that in mind, they recently had a paper published in Nature, a very prestigious journal, and ITV was interviewing them for that specific guidelines. The reason we came into the picture is because as a startup and any other company, robotic surgery company really, but specifically as a young startup that doesn't necessarily know how to navigate these pathways, these guidelines, these helps are massive to have. So we joined in, we showed the technology, and we commented on how important it is to have this support. So of course, Ideal is led by Professor Peter McCulloch at Oxford and Hani Marcus. Hani Marcus is our co-founder as well. So this was of course through his research role in UCL, but because we have that close connection, for us it's very easy to understand how important it is to have such guidelines. And of course, we also got to be featured on national television, which for us was really, really huge.
No, excellent. Sounds like a great experience, and great to have those connections as well. Look, Manios, really, really appreciate your time today. It's been really interesting to learn more about Panda Surgical, and I hope all of our viewers and listeners find it extremely interesting. I know I did. But if anybody wants to find out more about Panda Surgical, where would the best place for them to find out more be?
First of all, thank you, Toby, for the invitation. I think what you do, this podcast in general, is really interesting. I've been following any podcast on the subject, really. So thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate to be here and discuss what we do. People can find us. People can find us on panda-surgical.com, our newly, if I may add, built website. But then, of course, we're also very active on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. The team is. Feel free to reach out. If there's any way we can discuss, collaborate, help, or get help, this would be very, very beneficial for us.
Amazing. I'm sure there'll be many of our listeners and viewers that will take a keen interest in Panda Surgical, and hopefully you can create some long-lasting relationships there. But really appreciate your time today, Manios, and looking forward to seeing what the future holds for Panda Surgical, and I wish you all the best of luck in the project. There we go, guys. That's it for another episode of the Technology in Science podcast by Barrington James. I've been the host, Toby Hyde. Thank you very much for listening, and see you again soon.